Google, a place that seemingly everyone wants to work. It's almost 10 times harder to get a job at Google than it is to get into Harvard. So, why would anyone be crazy enough to leave? The traditional reason is that people would go on to bigger and better things like join startups in higher level positions or start their own completely new companies from scratch. Then, on January 20th, 2023, there was a new reason.
Google's parent company, Alphabet, announcing today it will cut 12,000 positions.
And then there's the Raymond reason. I was a contractor and the well simply ran dry. It was very clear after the January 20th layoffs, as well as layoffs throughout the rest of the industry, that everyone's tech jobs are not as stable as they used to feel. Thankfully, as a contractor, I was never really comfortable to begin with. That being said, here's my experience as a designer at Google for 13 months. As I mentioned earlier, I was a contractor. If you're one of Google's contractors, technically you're employed by the staffing agency, which means you're not allowed to put on your public profiles that you're a Google employee. You have to write Google via your agency, or your agency on assignment at Google, or something equally stupid sounding. I guess separating Google's real employees from us imposters is tax liability stuff on Google's part. If you simply put your position at Google onto your LinkedIn like you would for any other job, you will most likely get contacted by your agency telling you that your manager or project manager noticed that you are not correctly representing your position on your public profiles, or whatever. While I was there, I was an L3 designer, which at Google is basically the bottom of the food chain, aside from stretches during the summer when interns would pop in for a few weeks at a time to remind me of how significantly further in life they are than I was at that age. Not that I'm jealous or anything. Anyway, as an L3 designer, I reported to an L6 designer, and I split my time between the Google Health Studies team and the Fitbit team. While my job mainly consisted of being a glorified production designer, which I was fine with, I did get to wear many different hats under the design umbrella that ranged from legit UX work to creating logos for internal teams. The nature of design at Google is that designers are usually generalists with skills that significantly overlap. As a contract designer at Google, you will generally have 4 types of meetings. There's the project team meeting where everyone involved in the production of that project discusses things like a feature that will be removed after the team decided a week before that the feature would be put in, a week after the team decided the feature would be removed, a week after the team originally decided it would be put in. Then there is the regular one-on-one meeting with your manager, which is probably the meeting that's the most relevant to your ongoing work once you've gotten past those awkward first couple of meetings, when your manager still is not sure whether or not you are the biggest mistake she or he has ever made. And if you're a designer whose work primarily revolves around UX or interaction design, you'll have eng meetings where software engineers demo things they've prototyped, most of which you probably won't comprehend. And speaking of not comprehending, there is the recurring design team meeting where you get together with designers of adjacent products. If you're a contractor like me, you'll sit back and listen to discussions about projects that will impact a future at Google you are likely not going to be a part of. Oh, I spoiled the next section, didn't I? Those of you who've gotten or considered getting a contract position at Google probably stuck around to this point of the video because you want to know about transitioning to a full-time position. So, is it easier for a Google contractor to transition to a full-time position at Google than it is for an external candidate to get a full-time position at Google? The short answer is no. Contractors do, of course, have the obvious 2 advantages of 1, knowing how to do Google-specific work, and 2, having access to a network of Googlers who can speak to their work. But those contractors will probably still need to sit through the same tedious 4 to 8 week or whatever interview process that external candidates have to. Now that almost all 3 of you have left, let's talk about daily life. There is, of course, the equipment you'll be issued. If you're a full-time employee, you will get an I'm a good guy looking white badge. If you're a contractor like I was, you will get one of these make sure this imposter stands out red badges. As for equipment, you're probably curious to know if employees get to utilize competitor gadgets, or if they are forced into the fate worse than death that is using a Chromebook for design purposes. Are Chromebooks even still a thing? I'm happy to report that there is a strong MacBook culture within Google's design and eng teams. You will also have access to any other devices or gadgets relevant to your work, and yes, you will need to return them upon leaving the company. When I first began back in February 2022, the work was fully remote for about a month before the company transitioned to hybrid work where you were supposed to go into the office 2 or 3 times a week. This was not strictly enforced as it came down to whether or not your manager wants you in the office, and truly almost no one really cares where you work from as long as you get your work done. Personally, I almost never went into the office because to me there is basically no upside to it, and I've never been a big fan of throwing away precious minutes or hours of my day commuting. However, once in a blue moon I did actually go into the office, usually if I knew ahead of time that people from the design team planned to get together for lunch. One of the 2 offices I worked from is in San Francisco where my official desk was because I lived walking distance from that office. The other office I worked from was of course on the Mountain View campus everyone pictures in their heads when they think of Google. I have a question for you. Which office do you believe had the longer commute from my San Francisco apartment? Okay, so the San Francisco office was 10 minutes away on foot each way, and the Mountain View office was 75 minutes each way by shuttle. However, the commutes are actually both the same because the shuttle stop is 10 minutes away on foot from my apartment, and I could begin working using the shuttle's Wi-Fi while trying not to get distracted by scenery or motion sickness. As for the campuses, it's clear that these big tech companies just buy up space in San Francisco high-rises and Silicon Valley office parks and just bring in their company-branded installation art. In San Francisco, with the exception of the Spear Street office that has the clearly labeled Google signs outside, you really can't tell from the outside which high-rises contain Google offices. But on the inside, those signs are there to greet you on each and every floor. In Mountain View, I would describe the campus as a collection of mildly depressing office park buildings that the company did its best to jazz up by landscaping them with colorful robot and dino sculptures. However, I was impressed by the Bayview campus that sits a couple blocks east of the main Mountain View campus. As for the food, I'm a picky eater, so take my opinion with a pun intended grain of salt. I would give Google's famous free food a grade of B. Both the San Francisco and Mountain View offices have cafes and cafeterias on almost every floor. The Mountain View campus has additional large cafeterias hundreds of Googlers pack at around noon each day. And no matter where you are in a Google building, you're no more than a short walk from a small kitchen stocked with snacks. This all probably sounds great, but honestly, I'd prefer just eating my own food at home. That was especially true during my last on-campus lunch when I got this plate of rice, beef, and cabbage, the latter 2 tasting like they were more spice than actual food by volume. About 3 bites into this meal, my digestive system said, "Take 1 more bite and see what happens." And I said, "Okay, digestive system, you win. See you at dinner once you've settled down." I intended to put a section in this video about what I did outside of work, but the truth is I really didn't have a life outside of work aside from a few months in 2022 when I grinded to make my feature-length movie San Francisco. The movie is here on this channel if you ever have 45 minutes to burn. But let's get into my post-Google era plans and what being a kind of ex-Googler means. Believe it or not, I plan to continue my normal weekly 40-hour schedule, except those hours will now be entirely dedicated to finding my next gig. And as of recording this, I just finished post-Google week 1 and so far have remained disciplined in keeping that schedule. It turns out you can be quite productive for yourself when you're not giving those 40 hours to someone else in exchange for your right to survive. I'll conclude this video by talking about the hedonic treadmill of a dream job. When you first get a job at Google, it becomes part of your identity. There's a brief period when it feels like you've, air quote, made it. Then it becomes just another job. And here is one of the biggest life lessons I learned at Google, which is don't attach your identity to fleeting aspects of yourself because everything you'll ever be a part of will eventually come to an end. I will insert a footnote here because I can't ignore the irony that your best self often comes from treating whatever you're doing as if you've attached your identity to it. But ultimately, what you do in life should probably be driven more by purpose than identity, by understanding why you do what you do. This is why, despite Google's reputation, there are Googlers who leave voluntarily. They develop pursuits or passions they believe are being held back by their continued time and effort involvement at Google. Remember that purpose and that why you do what you do I mentioned a moment ago? This is why even though I would have continued as long as they could have afforded my contract, I'm not exactly heartbroken that it's over because I know I'm not defined by the company I work for. And my purpose should be, at least in part, independent from whatever brand I'm connected to in that moment. Your brand is yourself. Sure, Google may help provide a boost to your reputation that can alter your brand in ways that are beneficial to you, but ultimately your brand is you. Oh, I forgot to talk about the people. Every person I met was very kind, provided excellent feedback during presentations, and did whatever they could to be supportive. And the design team even made me this kudo board and gave me this thoughtful bottle of Raymond wine as a going away present.